Hi everyone, this is Sharon. Today I have a guest design team project to share with you. I was approached by a digital artist and asked if I would do a design team project using her digitals. And I'm going to show you a picture of her Etsy shop because I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce any of these names correctly. But the name of her shop, I think it's pronounced like Mille shop. And I've been pronouncing her name, I hope this is correct, Pascale or Pascale, and that's how it's spelled. So I will link her shop down below in my description so you can check out her digitals if you like. I purchased a number of digital kits from her, and then she graciously sent me quite a number of other kits that I could use in my project as well. So I've used maybe 6 or 8 of her kits in here, probably at least 8 of them in this project. So this journal is one that I wrapped up with this sari silk ribbon for the tie, and I just added a little bit of jewelry on there. And then for the cover of the journal, I use this beautiful book cover that I received from my friend Connie. Thank you so much, Connie. I'm working my way through your book covers. And I love these books with the images on the front. This one's called Marian Gray. And I just added a little bit of lace around the spine. It's got a beautiful spine. And that's what the back looks like. And then heading on inside. For the inside covers, I used some images from her Tattered Papers kit. It's got a lot of nice old letters and scripty kinds of documents. And so I use those for the covers. For the inside of my spine, I use this beautiful old kind of linen-y fabric. And then as we go through, I used, for my pages, I used quite a few from L'Orange Bleu kit and L'École, which is French for school. So you'll see some children and school images in here as well. So here I just created a pocket and adorned it with a little bit of lace. And then this is what the page looks like. This is the Orange Blue kit. And then in there, I've got this vintage French postcard and then a vintage telegram that I just tucked into that pocket. Here is one of the images from her L'École kit. And I adorned that page with some lace and a wax seal. And then here I just took a snippet from her. She's got a, I think it's one of my favorites of hers, Antique Fabric Samples kit. And I just took a piece of one of those images and kind of ripped it and added it to that page. Here's the title page for the book that I used. And then throughout, I've also used some washi tape from Lace Boutique 1. I think that's my favorite shop for washi tape. And then here I use some of that chintz or fabric sampler imaging to make my pocket. That's what the page looks like. And then in there, I just have this little journaling card that I made. And this I took out of my scrap box. And then here I took one of her documents and just did a little tri-fold, did some stenciling on the inside and left room for some journaling. Here on this page, it's one of her beautiful backgrounds, and I use this wide piece of lace for my belly bands, and then I made a couple of journaling cards to go in those bands. So I've got this one. And I was going to put a brad up here, but I saw Rachel from Roxy Creations did something lately in one of her videos where she just kind of tied everything together with a string. So that's what I did. And I like to keep these kind of loose so you can see the beautiful imagery underneath, and that'll leave room for some writing. And then this is the back. I just did some embossed paper. And then this one. And then I added a couple of labels onto those as well. Here I just added a little bit of ticking and a button. And then on this side of the page, I've got this image, and I just made a little journaling card with a little side tuck on the back and added some lace on the front. And then another little journaling spot. This I just lined with an old envelope piece. Here I took something out of my scrap box, an image, and I just created a little journaling card. It's kind of loosely torn. And then here I created a top tuck with this lacy piece. That's what the page looks like. And then, get that up where you can see it. And then this is from, again, the Tattered Papers kit. And then on the back, I just stamped it. Here, she's got an Art Nouveau kit. Some really pretty images in there. And I just made the little tab here, a side tab, to stick this in. So I've got this sort of full cabinet card. And then this is one of those vintage stamp sheets from a stamp book. Here I took a sewing instruction sheet for my page, and I just embellished that with some old cotton fabric and a label. And then on this side, I created a pocket with that instruction sheet, so I just kind of doubled it up. And then in there, I've got a couple of things. I've got this vintage cookbook page with some nice recipes on there, and I love the images that are in there as well. And then I also made this piece from her school kit. And that's just kind of a little scrappy pad sort of a thing. So I've got some offcuts in there. And then I've got this old envelope on the top, and I just stuck a little piece of vintage wallpaper in there. This is an image, I believe, well, I'm not sure if this was part of the page or if I added this. She does have a flower cards kit, and there's lots of really pretty flower cards in there, and I think that might be from there. And then here, oops, I always tend to skip a page when I'm going through. So this is from the sampler kit, and then here I took that sewing pattern envelope and used that as my page. And then I just folded it up at the bottom here to create my little pockets and put some brads in there to kind of hold that in place. And then in those pockets, I've got a couple of journaling cards. So I've got this one, again, added some ticking and some fabric. And I backed that with this beautiful damask fabric that I got from my friend Anne. And then I just took a rusty pin and added that with this little label on there. And then here, kind of did the same thing. And then on the envelope itself in the back, I just did some stenciling. And then also on the strings in this signature, I just added this vintage button, kind of slides up and down so you can put it wherever you like. Here I just did a little kind of a scrappy cluster on that page. And then here's another image from the Art Nouveau kit, and I just added some trim on there. Here in this little side tuck, that's what the page looks like. I've got some vintage items, French advertising, and then this nice old check from 1884. And then on this pocket, I trimmed these up with these faux buttons also. And then in there, I've got another vintage sheet from that cookbook. And then I also have this journaling card that I made. In the back, I glued on this grid paper, and I just punched it along the bottom. So there's plenty of writing room, but I only secured it here and here, so it also acts as a nice little tuck. And then I've got this journaling card in there. Here on this side of the page, I just did a fabric ruffle with some lace. And then again, I did a little adornment on this page. using up all my little lacy and fabric scraps. Here I've got a couple of pieces of ephemera, some Victorian scrap, and a page from a vintage needlework book. That's what the page looks like. And then this one, got a fabric tab there. And then here I created a pocket with the page, and in there I've got, this is again from her Tattered Papers kit, the back, and then this image is from her orange and blue kit, and I just kind of layered that on there with this little piece of metallic paper. And then on the back side there's room to do some writing. Here in the center of the signature, I've got a couple of pretty beads on the bottom. And I took this old envelope and used that for my pockets. And in there, I tucked these journaling cards that I made. So here's an image from one of her kits. And I just kind of waxed this paper that I added to the back and added a label on there. And then I made these tabs at the top and stitched those on. And then this one. In this pocket, I made this little ephemera piece from an old, let's see, is this French? Yes, looks like an old French book page. Just kind of use that as a folder for some writing paper. And then I layered up, this image is from her Tattered Papers. And then I just layered this floral image over the top of that and added a little metallic button on there. Here there was a hole on the page. I think it was bound into a notebook, so I just created another hole so I could add this ribbon on there. And then here I took some of this fabric and wrapped it around the page to this side as a tab, but I left it wide enough so that this little bookmark could slide in there. Wouldn't be flopping around too much. And this is just some embossed paper. And then I've got this little bulb pin with a crystal on it, little crystal bead. And then on this side, another one of these nice sampler pages. I've got this pretty old photograph. It looks like either a bunch of sisters or schoolmates or something on a bridge. And then this little piece of paper that was in this book. It was a handwritten note. So I just put that back in there. Here for my page, I used this piece of eco-dyed linen, and I just kind of hand stitched these handkerchief pieces on the side. So here you can see that's embroidered. I just added like a French knot there and stitched it around the top. Same with the bottom piece. And then on this side, I just took a rusty safety pin and added this piece of lace on there. Here on this page, I just reprinted some of the images underneath and then secured them with brads. So this one and this one. And then that creates a nice kind of pocket. And I just stuck a little bit of ephemera in there, this nice old adding machine tape with the nice big numbers on it. And then some receipts. Here on this little side tuck, I created another ephemera piece with some book page. This one is in Italian. I just took one of her flower cards, put that on the front, and then created some belly bands on the inside with this coffee dyed paper, and then just added some little scraps of paper in there. Edith Holden book page. I kind of forget I have those sometimes and don't add them in real often. So here on this one, I've got this pocket, and then this is a tag that I made. One of her pretty, I think this is from the Chintz kit. I just punched that on the bottom, and I used a flash card for my base, and this ticket for my tab at the top. And then on the back side, I've got some of this tracing paper, and I just inked it up a little bit. It's still writable. I tested it. You can use pencil or pen on there. And then here I have this beautiful old blue ledger paper. And in the inside, I folded it in to create these side tucks, and then I just used this velvet ribbon to kind of hold those in place. So inside here, I've got a couple of tags that I made. So these have these lacy pockets on the front, and I just added this sari trim at the top and used her Art Nouveau image for the base. And then in there, I've got these kind of little faux cabinet cards that I made. And the back has writing paper. And then this is what this one looks like. Here I've got another one of those chintz tags that I made. On this page, I clipped on this little piece. It's basically just some stenciling on craft paper, but I love the white against the brown. And then here I've got an antique invoice from 1911, I believe it was. And then the background is just, I should show that to you. It's just one of her beautiful images, kind of a neutral one, lots of writing space on that page. Here again, I've used one of her flower cards, and on this page, I've got the other side of that linen. So I just took a couple of labels and stitched those and put those on there. And then on this side, I've got another piece of that handkerchief, and then a layer of lace over the top of that. Here I created a belly band with these vintage handwriting pieces. And then in there, I took one of her envelopes from her kit. I think it was, again, the Tattered Papers kit. There was a front and a back to it. So I just added a sticker there, and I stitched the front and back together, added my own vintage stamp on there. And then in there, I just have this little writing piece that I made. And then I always like to line my envelopes with a nice little surprise on the inside. Here I used a paper doily for my page and some old music paper. Here I've got a tab with a vintage button on the top. And then this pocket has some items in it. A faux calling card that I created. And then this antique French letter, and this one is dated 1856. Here I've got a flip out. I just added this tab to it, so that flips out like that. And then in there I've got this journaling card. Here again, I just added some lace to the pages. They're so pretty, I didn't want to cover them up too much. And then here I've got another side tuck where I just added some of this lacy fabric and a label on there that flips out. And then in there I've got these vintage postcards. And then on this side I had clipped on this little book page that I used as a folder for this journaling card. And this is just a check image. It's not an original. And then some writing room on the back. Here I created a couple of bands with some velvet ribbon to use as a corner tuck. That's what the page looks like. And then in there I made this little document keeper. What I did was I added this ticking fabric on here, and wrapped it around, and then I have a paper label on there as well. And then on this side, I glued on this button. So that kind of, I use that as my closure. So, oops, wrong one. There are two strings, so this one just winds around the button and then around the whole thing. And then that opens up. So the back side is this sampler image. And then on the front, I've got this, it's from an antique book that I had dated 1885. Kind of the cover page of that. And then I've got a waxed decorative paper in there, some writing paper. And then one of her tattered papers in the background. And that brings us to our last page. I just did a little adornment on that one. So that is my journal share for today. This journal will be for sale in my Etsy shop if you're interested. I thank you so much for coming along with me today, and until next time, bye-bye.